Hide your kids, hide your wife. Beta 17 is here. Boy, we got us some drama in the MX Bikes community here. So, there's going to be a lot of I told you so's in this video. Just going to go ahead and warn you right off the bat. Oh, man. And I'm back on the default bike of the game here. The default Poboso bike in the game instead of the newest OEM pack bikes of the game because it seems to never fail. Just like I was talking about in my previous OEM pack bike video where I talked about all of these other issues that will arise from having community-made stat changes, you know, attribute changes to the OEM bikes that were not changed by the developer, okay, you know, the whole system that MX Bikes has. It never seems to fail. Anytime there's a new beta, we have a conflict between the community creators that's made the newest OEM bike pack with all these specific stats and, you know, characteristics to the bike, and then Poboso coming over here and making a beta, a newer beta. They always seem to conflict, right? Like, the beta affects the newest OEM pack, or the newest OEM pack, you're not getting the full effect of the bike of the new beta because Poboso is not the one actually making the stats on the bikes of those new OEM pack bikes. This is one of those issues I was talking about when it's not the developer themselves going in there and making the characteristics of the bikes that everybody's riding in the game, okay? But nonetheless, I don't know exactly how much it affected those OEM bikes, but I'm just on the stock default bike of the game just to get the full effect of the beta from what Poboso designed it for, you know what I mean? So, number one thing, I know a lot of you guys probably wondering, what did it change? You know, what did the beta change? One of the first big things, Poboso has finally allowed you to raise your field of view inside of the game instead of having to go through those little menus and you know, go through the little files of the game to raise your field of view up. The maximum used to be 110, and I think they've raised it up to 130 now. Boy, that sounds familiar, don't it? You remember that video that Spencer made at the end of last year titled something like The Secret to MX Bikes, right? Talking about going in there and raising your field of view higher than you can inside of the game, and it makes the game so much easier, and so many people are doing it. And you had a lot of those, you know, MX Bikes elitists, you know, them dudes that think they know everything about everything because they know a little bit about MX Bikes, right? A lot of those dudes tried to swoop in there and try to act like I was spreading all this misinformation. People really aren't a lot of people really aren't raising their field of view that high. Spencer's just wrong. He's been saying all this shit wrong about MX Bikes. Oh, look at him. That's so funny. Haha, he acts like raising your field of view is this big secret. And most people don't even raise their field of view that high, right? That came from a dude named Rubs, right? He tried to act like, you know, the pros weren't raising their field of view that high. People weren't really doing that, right? And Spencer's just wrong. He's been wrong about MX Bikes this whole time, about everything he said about it. Boy, I find that to be very interesting that in the very next beta, what does Poboso do? What does the creator of the game do? They go in there and allow you to raise your field of view higher than 110 inside of the game. Boy, that's funny, ain't it? If there wasn't that many people doing that, if there wasn't that many people raising their field of view that high, if it didn't really help you that much in the game, I can promise you Poboso would not have raised it inside of the game like that in the very next beta like they have here. It was a much needed thing for a reason. Do you see my point? Oh, was Spency Boy really not that wrong about that? Oh, boy, that's funny, ain't it? And some of these MX Bikes pro dudes tried to say shit like, well, Poboso doesn't let you raise your field of view higher than 110 inside of the game because that wouldn't be realistic. Oh, boy, it's all funny how everything comes full circle, isn't it? The video I just make on it, right? talking about, yo, Poboso, it's kind of stupid how you have to go through all these files to raise your field of view higher than 110 in the game. You know, like most people want a higher field of view than 110, and you won't even let us do it inside of the game, so everybody's got to go around all these, you know, skirt through all these files to try to get their field of view high enough. And then Poboso allows you to then raise your field of view higher than 110 inside of the game. Oh, wow. Boy, damn. The irony on that one is straight up impeccable, bro. If I was so wrong about this, you know, all these people running a higher field of view than you can actually run inside of the game, you know, higher than 110. If I was so wrong about that, then why would Poboso then go in there and allow you to raise your field of view higher than 110 inside of the game in the very next beta, in the very next update of the game? Why would they do that? And this is another thing that just absolutely cracked me up, bro. So get this. Apparently the information has come out, and part of this weird feeling that some people are getting in the game, apparently there was a hidden assist in the game before Beta 17, and Poboso has now just taken away that hidden assist in the game, which has then created more bugs or whatever, right? Nonetheless, that's another element to this beta, and apparently it messed up a lot of people's like custom gear and custom you know, bike graphics and stuff. Not really sure what's going on with all that. But, yeah, this is what you should expect in a game that's not completed yet. I think a lot of you boys see you jump the gun to think because MX Bikes got released on Steam that, oh, well, this just must pretty much be the, you know, the full version of the game. They may add little updates to it later, but this is pretty much the game. And the reality of it is, at least from what they've done with Beta 17, they're not even close to being done with changing big things to the game. So that's what I'm saying. All you boys, you get so attached to this certain MX Bikes beta, and you have all these opinions about it and all these things with it, but apparently Poboso is still changing pretty drastic things in the game, right? Okay, so let's move on to some of the actual feeling changes on the bike, right? It seems as if, to me, they have made it where the bike kind of tries to slide out in the corner a little bit more than it did beforehand. That does seem to be like a change they've made. There seems to be a little bit of a difference with landing. Oh, damn, Sensible T hitting good, dude. Holy shit. There seems to be a little bit of a difference with landing as well, kind of how the suspension reacts when you land. These are just, you know, quick first impressions of the feeling of the bike with this new beta. Trying to, you know, really dig into those differences to what the bike felt like before and what it feels like now. The bike tries to slide out on you a little bit more. When you land on something, it feels different. I don't necessarily know if the landing feels harder or easier than it did before. It just feels different, right? But certainly the more chance of sliding out in the corner makes every kind of bigger jump that was in the game a lot harder to hit. Obviously, with these default bikes on MX Bikes, they're a little bit slower than those OEM bikes, but even still, that's one aspect to it, you know, and I think that's probably what's frustrating a lot of people is it's made it harder to ride the bike. Therefore, it's harder to hit a bunch of these different jumps, like on a lot of these newer aerial supercross tracks that you could easily hit beforehand. They're more difficult now. So I think that's what's causing this big uproar. And this is something I tried to tell you boys with MX Bikes. This is the biggest reason why I didn't just dive right in, you know, neck deep into the game 3 or 4 years ago and put all that time into it like some of these pro MX Bikes dudes did. This is precisely why I didn't do that. Because they're still obviously changing a lot of things with the physics of the game, a lot of things with the mechanics of the game. They're still changing a lot of those things. So all you boys putting all that fucking time into MX Bikes to learn all the systems and get your setups down and try to... All it takes is Poboso to come out with a new beta And all that shit you thought you knew about the game, you might as well throw that out the window, because Poboso is still in such early development with MX bikes that they're changing drastic enough things that, to me anyways, it seems kind of silly to play the game to that serious of a level. This is why I'm so confused about all these dudes doing shit like world record lap times and, you know, all this crazy shit on MX bikes. Because it's like, all it takes is Poboso to come out with a new beta and it changes everything. It changes how fast you can go on a track, changes the jumps you can hit, changes... I remember Poboso, an update they added sometime last year, the year before, I remember it literally slowed the bikes down, just like at a base level. There was a specific quad jump you could hit on a... I think it was like a Muddy Creek, one of the Muddy Creek replica tracks, and I was hitting it very, very easily, and then one day I got on MX bikes, and I just couldn't fucking hit the jump, and I realized it was because Poboso went in there and added some kind of update to it that slowed down every bike in the game by, like, I would say a good 5 to 10%, so then it just straight up limited you from being able to hit that bigger jump. And my whole point was saying all that is, Poboso is going to continue to do that and make bigger changes to the game. And I don't know what they're going to do with it, but, you know, the more and the more that Poboso tries to make their game like a full-blown simulator and less like a simulator arcade hybrid like it currently, or like it really was before this beta, the more and the more they try to make it like a full-blown simulator, they're going to be making the game more and more difficult. You know, they're going to be... It's just the nature of it. The more and the more they get that bike to react going across whoops or roughness, you know, the more they advance this physics system and the feeling and the mechanics of this game to try to make it more and more like a full-blown dirt bike, it's going to change all of you motherfuckers' outlooks on the game. That's what I'm saying. You boys, you keep looking at MX bikes like it's this whatever current beta that we're in. You boys look at it like that's MX bikes, that's what it is, that's what it's always going to be, and it's not. They're still doing drastic changes with the game, and this beta 17 should be full-blown proof of that. Totally changed the amount that you'll slide out of the corners. I mean, it changes the entire game when they make that big of a change to it. And I think a lot of you boys, you're getting very, very attached to whatever beta, whatever version of the game that you really, really started to play it on and that you really got super deep on and you felt like you was getting faster and better at the game and getting faster on the bikes. You're going to get so attached to that anytime Poboso tries to go in there and really change the physics or really change the mechanics of the game, it's going to completely, you know, spin you for a loop. It's going to frustrate the shit out of you. It's going to piss you off because you spent all that time trying to learn that specific version of the game, but MX Bikes is still in such an early stage that it's going to change so many more times. Just think how much they're going to change the game in the next 5 years. The shit you thought you knew about the game now is going to be totally different than the way the game is in 5 years. That right there is why I've not really, really started putting those hours into MX Bikes. That's why I'm not pro racing in the game. That's why I'm not really doing that, because it's still in those early stages. Do you understand what I'm saying? And naturally, the more and the more they make MX Bikes like a real-life dirt bike, you know, trying to make it more to that level, it's simply naturally just going to make the game more difficult than it is currently. It's going to make it more difficult. It's going to make that bike react more in the whoops, on the roughness. You know, if Poboso starts, you know, really developing the game in that direction, you do realize that it's basically going to turn into a MX simulator, but just a different game, right? That's part of what makes this like current charm of MX Bikes and all these people getting into it, is because, like I've been trying to tell you boys, it's more of an arcade sim hybrid than it is a full-blown simulator. But that's not to say that that's how it's always going to be. You know, if Poboso starts making these changes and making the game more difficult, and making it, harder for the average person to just come in there and learn the game and figure it out and start getting around a track. If they start making it more difficult than that, more like a full-blown simulator, then it's going to totally change the dynamic around the community of the game, right? Once they start doing that with it, then it's not going to appeal to that mass audience that it was beforehand. It's not going to be as easy for your dudes coming from arcade games to come over to MX Bikes and learn it as quick. The harder and the harder they make the game, the more and the more they make that bike react through whoops or hardcore roughness or whatever. The harder they make it in general, the less and less people it's going to appeal to, because it's just like MX Simulator. That's a big reason why it's so underground, is because it's such a difficult game that so many of your average players will just never even play MX Simulator or never even really get into it because it's too hard. It pushes them away from the game. Yeah, dude. I just find this to be so interesting because, the craze around MX Bikes really, it all developed around the Poboso coming out with MX Bikes on Steam, and then everybody getting into it, and it being that certain difficulty range, right? Everybody got so attached to MX Bikes being that certain difficulty range, so now, if Poboso ever goes in there and tries to make the game more difficult, the community is going to lose their shit, because the MX Bikes community is not just a simulator community. This is what I've been trying to tell you boys. That it's more of a arcade sim hybrid community. You got a lot of dudes that are playing MX Bikes that literally couldn't even hold the bike up on MX Simulator. They couldn't even ride one lap on a track, but they can mob on MX Bikes. You have a lot of dudes in that category. I'm just telling, it's just the truth. But you also got a lot of guys that can play MX Sim or are decent at MX Sim that also play MX Bikes. You got those guys as well, but the bigger and the bigger of an audience you get with a game, the more and the more you make it down that like medium difficulty range, you're going to bring in so many more people, right? And that's what MX Bikes has done. MX Bikes' community is more of like a melting pot of all different skill levels, dudes that's never even played MX Simulator. They're way more of an arcade game kind of dude, and then they got into MX Bikes. You got hardcore simulator dudes on MX Bikes. You got this this community of every skill level you could possibly imagine. Whereas MX Simulator, the real community around that game, everybody's at least somewhat proficient at MX Simulator. Of course, obviously, you got all your dudes that have a real hard time with the game, but they're still in the community, but it's nowhere near the amount of, more like casual level type players and skilled players on the MX Bikes community. That's why you're going to get so much more of an outroar. You're going to get so much more of a drama situation when Poboso tries to go in there and make the physics. Anything that gets done with MX Bikes' physics that makes the game harder, you're going to have half of the community of MX Bikes that's going to say it's terrible. It's the worst update ever. It's terrible. You've got this split community between dudes that are really more arcade level players and then dudes that are full-blown simulator players. So then when Poboso goes there and makes the game harder, you're going to have half of the community that loves that because it's more like an actual simulator. It's more difficult. It's more skill-gapped. It's more challenging. Then you're going to have this whole other world, this whole other half of your community that you've built up with the game by having the game more of an arcade sim hybrid this whole time, and all these dudes has gotten into it. You got yourself in a pickle now, is basically what I'm saying.